More and more men are leaving society and going their own way. They are leaving college, the workforce, marriage, and fatherhood at an alarming rate. Some blame the men themselves. Due to their immaturity, they say, they cannot handle the responsibilities of adulthood. Others blame men for not wanting to be stay-at-home moms in a reality where female professionals are increasingly preferred by our service economy. Helen Smith, a forensic psychologist with a doctorate from the University of Tennessee and author of the book Men's Strike, offers an alternative theory. Most men act irresponsibly not out of immaturity or to harm women. They do it because society offers them little incentive to be responsible fathers, husbands, and providers. The statistics Helen Smith presents are frighteningly discouraging. Male labor force participation has dropped dramatically. In 1970, about 8% of working-age men were employed full-time. Today, only 66% are. Women now earn 58% of US bachelor's degrees. That's partly because, as Christina Hoff Sommers wrote in her 2001 book, The War Against Boys, the education system favors docile, conformist girls over aggressive, competitive boys. Feminist ideology also prevails in college, which view male students as potential aggressors when interacting with their female classmates. Smith argues that men are simply responding to a woman-centered culture that systematically disparages them as incompetent, treats them as criminals, discredits their achievements, and openly discriminates against them in places like family courts. Even after a divorce, mothers are often awarded custody of their children, even if they have cheated on their husbands. Often, husbands are forced to pay for children they are not biologically related to. For women, it's my body, my choice, while men must pay child support even if the mother lied about using birth control. Smith blamed feminists but also passive men for accepting all this hell. The white knights generally act out of financial or political interest or to date more women. The men feel the backlash and go on strike, consciously or unconsciously. To solve the problem, Smith argues that we should listen to men without bias to understand how they really feel and think. Women can then connect with them more openly and intimately. She mistakenly believed that feminism means equality for men and women. Now, men need justice and attention. Smith believes that discrimination against men is as bad as discrimination against women. Despite their sense of duty, accomplishment, and manhood, men today are turning their backs on society because they know that they may be taken advantage of at any moment. From laws that protect women but not the men who may be falsely accused, to the lack of due process in sexual harassment cases on college campuses. Our society is at war with men. In 2010, 38,364 people committed suicide in the United States, of which 30,277 were men. Men must overcome psychological barriers to advocate for their own issues and personal relationships so that legal and cultural changes are just and fair to them. Why do not men get married? Western culture has spent the last 50 years making marriage a better deal for women. But for men, it has become a real prison. Men use it to go to work, come home, and feel like the king of the castle. Now, instead of equality in marriage, men are expected to share housework. No wonder fewer and fewer men are getting married today than in the past. In 1970, 8% of men aged 25 to 29 were married. By 2007, only about 40% were. The marriage rate in the US has dropped 40% over the past 4 decades to its lowest level ever. American men, faced with a system that hopelessly curtails the family, have unconsciously begun a marriage strike. Men have other psychological and legal concerns about marriage in today's post-feminist society. Married men have fewer incentives to get married today. Men need to be treated well so they will marry, have children, and support them so women can have a better life. The author regrets having to write an entire book to defend such an obvious problem. How are men supposed to grow up and relate well to women if women do not seem to like them? The media portrays men as clowns, potential perverts, or deadbeats. He may even have a child only to discover that it isn't his, but he still has to pay child support. Divorce can also pose a financial threat to a man. Men who are married tend to see their friends and family less, which can hurt their self-esteem. Society pressures men to do things that aren't in their best interests. Single men's lives are fulfilling, happy, and if not respected, at least envied. The only way to change that is to improve the incentives for marriage, because nowadays marriage is more of a punishment than a reward. Society cannot treat men as a source of unclaimed resource. They are human beings who make rational choice. The liberation of intimacy has made marriage obsolete. When it's much easier for men to get their needs met outside of marriage, the need for stable relationships decrease. Multiple partners also make it harder for people to build strong emotional relationships. As a psychologist, Smith believes that many men who do not want to marry are not particularly angry at women, but simply are not interested in having a relationship with them. The culture celebrates and encourages women who cheat. On the other hand, cheating men are perceived as dishonest and deserving of being cheated. Smith advised men to be careful when they marry. We are already moving toward a society in which women have colonized procreation and child-rearing, and men have less and less incentives to participate fully in family life. Fatherhood can be a nightmare, legally, financially, and emotionally, because of the laws governing divorce, custody, and access to children. Paternity fraud is so prevalent that it's hard to count exactly how many men pretend to be the fathers of other people's children they think are their own. There are even men who pay child support for children who are not their own. The emotional damage and sense of betrayal are massive for a man who discovers he is a victim of paternity fraud. Most men feel anger, which often turns into depression. Smith also says that men are less likely to attend college, which has led to a decline in their average salary. Since 1969, the average salary of an American man has dropped by nearly $13,000. That's a 28% drop. In addition, the number of jobs available to men without a college education has dropped significantly. Today's men are subjected to so much sexual harassment and higher education politics around their way to be that they are afraid to date women. We live in a politics of revenge, not equality. We even see false accusations as collateral damage. Men realize they do not belong in college and go on strike, consciously or unconsciously. If they spot a man next to a child or teenager, they will ask him to move to another seat. The plane will not take off if the passenger does not obey. Because men are afraid to engage in many areas of public life and work, especially those involving children, children have fewer and fewer role models and can end up being harmed or worse, suffer violence from real abusers. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 24 million boys grew up in fatherless homes. Male teachers in elementary schools are rare. They make up only 16% of all elementary school teachers. Discrimination against men is a threat to our civilization. It's a human rights violation. Stereotypes against men poison our public discourse, distort our understanding of the real difference between us, and diminish our chance of overcoming difference in society. Smith says that if women are stupid enough to fall into this trap, they deserve what they get. In short, women have much more to fear in a world where men not only disrespect them, but actually dislike them. As a response to attacks on their gender, men withdraw from society, protect themselves, and strike. Smith pleads for them to break their silence. Stop being silent and defend your views. At the very least, society needs to listen to them in the following areas: marriage, paternity rights, forced fatherhood, education, advertising, and the culture that portrays men in a negative light. Equality is not a zero-sum game where one group has power and the other has less or none. Our society is better off when men are productive, happy, and treated fairly. In light of the acceptance of misandry in our society, now is the time to take action.
Comfort and illusion, numb us to the pain.